Come on. Here's one. Here we go. What's going on, guys? This is Gene Jensen. Today we're going to talk about the baits you need to be using in July. Yes. All right, so first of all the baits for the June video, which I'll link right up here, still hold true for July, because not a whole lot changes between June and July, as in depths and where the fish are holding out and stuff like that. So I would just take June and then add July to it. So the first bait that I want to talk about is a Shakyhead. Finesse is something that I rarely ever go fishing without in the summertime, because the summer can be really tough, and sometimes the only way you can get them to bite is by throwing a Ned rig or a Shakyhead or something like that. So Shakyhead, basically, well, I like stand-up heads and I like heads that I can drag, and I've got 3 different types here. I've got the Greenfish Tackle Crawball, and I usually clip 1 or 2 of the corkscrew off. I clip a little bit of it off just because I think that's too long, but it's a really good Shakyhead. The second one is a Rhino from Picasso. I use this one when I'm fishing a lot of silty water because it stands straight up and it keeps your worm somewhat out of the silt. If you've got some really thick silt, this is really good for pond fishing and that kind of stuff. Plus it's fairly weedless. And then last but not least is the one I use the most, and this is a Missile Baits, and I never can remember the name of it, but it's a Missile Baits Shakyhead. Now, I fish this on a spinning rod, typically a medium or a medium light spinning rod. 8-pound test fluorocarbon to a 20-pound test mainline braid. That's my go-to, because you want to fish light line anyway. So 8-pound, maybe 6 if you're using something like this. This is a 1/8 ounce Shakyhead, but I usually throw a little bit heavier than that. But you throw it out, let it sink to bottom, you shake it, you know, and I'll link to all the videos that I have for all of these baits anyway, so you guys can learn how to fish them. But the Shakyhead, being able to throw it out and offer the bass something that just looks easy to grab, it is a lot of times really good. All right, so now what baits would I throw on a Shakyhead? Typically, I'm gonna throw a straight tail worm. Be it a really heavy Shakyhead with a big straight tail, big worm or whatever, it's gonna be a straight tail. This is a Zoom trick worm. A finesse worm works great. The BFF from 13 Fishing was designed for Shakyheads. It's got a lot more float to it, and it's one of those that when you really need the action, it's got a ton of action. So don't forget that. I'm going to link to all this stuff down in the description, and even some extra baits that I may or may not talk about that are some of my favorites to fish on some of these baits. So it's always down in the description. But anyway, straight tail worm typically, and that's all you're going to need. So the next one is everybody's favorite, the hollow body frog. This thing is probably the most fun bait to fish with when the bass are shallow and active. Whether they be in the brush or be in heavy cover or just along the bank early in the morning, a hollow body frog is amazing. I've got 2 of them here. These are the 2 I use probably, well, 100% of the time really. I got the tried and true Spro bronze eye frog. I got a few rattles in them, but that's for mat fishing and stuff like that. And then the 13 Fishing Trash Panda. This thing I had quite a bit to do when we were in the design of it and stuff like that, about making it to where it doesn't take on water and it releases water quickly and easily when the fish bites, and the angle of the hook and everything about this. I had a little bit of input, so I'm kind of partial to it. It walks really well, and the bass absolutely wreck it. So these 2 are my favorite ones. I'm gonna fish them on a heavy action rod. Well, it's hard to find a short one, but I like to fish the shortest one that I can find. Heavy power with 50 to 65 pound braid, 8:1 gear ratio reel. You can, you know, a lot of people fish a 7.3 to a 7.6 foot rod, which is fine too. But another thing to remember is this time of the year, you're typically not fishing mats, unless it's, you know, certain lakes will have mats, but you're typically not fishing mats. You'll fish somewhat open water, so you want one that's really easy to walk. And the shorter the rod, the easier it is to walk. But a freaking frog is one of my favorite baits to fish in the summertime. Next, now we talked about the frog. Now you guys, a lot of guys, and I really don't do a good job of explaining this, but the difference between a frog and a toad. Okay, a frog is the hollow body style. And when you hear somebody talk about a toad, they're talking about these right here. You got the horny toad and you got the rage toad, and what they are frog baits that you cast and retrieve. And so what you do is you rig them with an EWG, typically a 4/0 or a 5/0 Gamakatsu extra wide gap hook. Can be belly weighted or not, it really doesn't matter. But and you throw it over top of grass and around the shallows. It's like a buzz bait that's on steroids. Okay, not really loud, but really really has a lot of action, a lot of kick along the bank and over grass. And in the summertime, the grass hasn't topped out, so you're throwing over top of the grass and you're reeling it back. Really simple, easy to fish. Not a whole lot to explaining it, but you want to have it on a heavy or a medium heavy rod, at least 20-pound test. I was going to say fluorocarbon, but it's top water, so the fluorocarbon is going to make it sink. But 20-pound test mono, but I would fish it on 50 braid. Really, at 50 braid, and have a super line Gamakatsu EWG. That way it doesn't, your braid doesn't flex the hook out and you lose the fish. But the rage toad and the horny toad are literally the only two that I fish. I don't see any reason to fish anything else because they both work really good. And this one works real good for a buzzbait trailer, by the way. But anyway, the toad, awesome in the summertime. All right, so the next one is one that I literally have on the boat all year long and pretty much have it tied onto a rod 10 months out of the year. But it's a really good one for July when you're covering a lot of water. You river fishermen should be fishing one of these all the time. But when you got a lot of cover, a lot of laydowns, grass, submerged grass, anything like that, this bait comes through everything. And that is a Swimjig. And I don't have a white one, so this trailer is not going to match this. But a Swimjig in white or a bluegill color like this is dynamite this time of the year. Most of the bass are keyed in on bluegill that are up shallow, and the ones that are out deep are the ones that are keyed in on shad. Just remember that. Now, this is a greenfish tackle Swimjig. It's pretty much the only one that I use. Really good components, good hook, good head style, head shape, and everything else. I do trim the weave guard a bit. This one's brand new, but this one right here is, it's just, I've never had a problem with it, so I've had no reason to try anything else. I do have some 6th Sense ones that I've tried a little bit, but I always end up going back to this one. Not that I don't like the 6th Sense, I just like this one. Trailers, I'm gonna throw a Rage Menace or a paddle tail. Those are the two. And on the Rage Menace, when I put it on here, I typically put it on here to where the tail is up and down, and then I rip the top one off. So it's just one tail kicking, and that gives me a nice low profile and a ton of action. I'm gonna fish it on a medium heavy rod with either 50-pound braid or 17 to 20-pound test fluorocarbon. I like a short rod for a Swimjig, something like a 7-foot or a 6'10", if I can find it. Just because I'm trying to make good, accurate casts around things, typically around laydowns and docks and things like that. But man, it is an absolute blast to fish, and it's one of those that you can cover a lot of water, you can skip it, you can do anything with, so it's a really good one to have in your boat. All right, so my next one is a flipping jig. Some type of jig that's good for heavy cover. This is a heavy cover jig right here. It doesn't get hung up a whole lot. It's got living rubber because I love living rubber, and I usually retie all the, if they don't have living rubber on it, I usually rip the skirt off and tie it myself. Something like a skipping jig, a dock jig, something that you can get up under cover, but a flipping jig in the summertime to, again, just like the Swimjig, cover water, but able to get it into thick cover and let it drop down and be able to get the fish out. Something with a real heavy hook. So what I'm looking at is I want a heavy action rod, say 50-pound braid, maybe 20-pound fluorocarbon if I'm lazy and don't want to switch out to braid, and then 8:1 gear ratio reel so you can catch up with them real quick. This is the bite that when you're flipping into heavy cover, that a lot of times they hit it on the fall and you don't feel the bite. And so you got to count down and everything else. You just got to be real careful and really pay attention to what's going on with it. But when you hit them and you set the hook, you hit them hard. You want to turn their head fast and get them out of thick cover. But a flipping jig in the summertime is ideal. And I'm going to leave a link to a couple of the ones that I like to fish down in the description. And that's it. That's all the baits for July. I hope you guys learned something from this video. Be sure to check out the videos that are associated with these baits. But most of all, if you haven't subscribed, be sure to subscribe, hit the notification bell. But like I always say, be sure to introduce somebody to fishing. Introduce them to my channel. Let me help you teach them how to fish. More importantly, get out on the water, go out and catch some fish, and have a great day. We'll see you.